So I just bought a podcast. I know a lot of people hear about buying businesses, but in this case, I bought a podcast. And it's a funny story because I was once a guest on this podcast. Actually, twice I was a guest, and I even sponsored it some years ago. I thought it would be interesting to break down how I went from being a guest on the podcast to eventually acquiring it and rebranding it for a new use case. So let's dive in. But first, this episode is brought to you by Convert.ai. Convert.ai helps B2B SaaS and services hit their growth records. For the past decade, they've helped companies from YC, A16Z, seed, Series A stage companies, all the way up to the likes of BitGo, Adecco, Microsoft, SEMrush, Coke, hit growth records by handling their end-to-end demand generation. If you're interested in working with a partner that handles your end-to-end demand generation and actually works on a performance basis, putting their skin in the game to help your company grow, get in touch. The domain name is Convert.ai, and the link to book is convert.ai/book. With that out of the way, let's move on to the show. So here it is. Formerly, it was called Real Sales Talk, and it was run by a friend. So that actually helps if you're trying to acquire a company, is actually begetting and befriending that person on a genuine level. Sean's an amazing guy. Phil Keen's awesome. Shout out to Henry Johns as well. These are people that I just got along with. And when I actually reached out to them, it was a natural conversation. I literally just sent a DM saying, hey, long shot, but are you interested in potentially selling your podcast? That's basically it. So the takeaway there is that there's no substitute for personal rapport and connection. So I had a genuine relationship with Sean. We would like each other's content. We would DM back and forth. And we did this for years before this conversation ever happened. So what I did is I also bought the domain name grow.fm. This actually took a very long time. There was someone squatting on it. They didn't know how to transfer it. So patience is also key. But in any case, it eventually happened. It actually happened just today as I'm recording this episode. But here I am actually. Look at this guy. He looks like young Jeff Bezos. Young Jeff Bezos. Look at that. Now, before and after, right? In fact, you can even find me before that. Look at this.
Everyone, it's coming on.
There I am again. Look at me. This was back in 8 years ago, talking about cold email. In fact, they would share their cold emails and I would critique it. I loved the premise of this. I actually really appreciated that instead of talking abstractly and theoretically, this show would actually break down concepts, which is something that I'm taking with me. And I'm going to continue in that path, in that same spirit with this new channel, is actually breaking down the things that most companies keep close to their chests. They keep it hidden. They don't disclose what works for them because they're afraid that others will use those same avenues to grow their companies. I believe in a more abundance mindset. I believe that most people will not execute against anything anyways. So if this isn't valuable for salespeople, marketers, founders, I don't know what is. Here's actually the DM thread, because in the spirit of actually showing you how this stuff works, I can talk about it abstractly. I can be on a theoretical level, but I think action is everything. Implementation is everything. So here's how I did it. We were having a natural conversation anyways. And what I eventually segued to was long shot, but do you think you'd be open to taking someone on the pod? I don't even think this is a great message, by the way, in retrospect. This is another lesson here. Done is better than perfect. This is maybe a C+ message. I think I was actually on my phone and like literally just in between meetings or something. And it was something that just occurred to me off the cuff. I also had to follow up. Most prospects, even when you're talking about deals like this, you have to follow up with them. I reminded him that I was a former sponsor. You know, I'm sure he knew that I was on the podcast a couple times, but that really teed me up for having this conversation. We eventually went back and forth from there, agreed on the number. I agreed that I would use this channel for good, not for bad, not for any nefarious purposes, because I want to do right by all of these guests who have been on the show. They've had the likes of Trish, John Barrows, Richard Harris. They've had some heavy hitters on the show in the past. Some of them I might bring back on. What are the lessons, just to recap? Maintain a connection with someone, even if it's years on end, because you don't know what the future holds. The best deals happen when you can actually slide into the DMs, get on a texting basis, message them on WhatsApp or what have you. You want to move off email with someone who could really make a decision, because at that point, you're on a personal level. Those channels are easier to get in touch with them. Even in this case, I had to follow up though. So I don't know what AI future world we're going to live in, where we just tell Claude once what we want and it'll make it happen perennially until it pans out. But what I know is true is that persistence is going to continue to be the backbone of progress. Persistent action, really putting forth effort, following up, unabashedly so, until you get what you're after. And hopefully that's very aligned with what the other party wants to, right? Sean got his number as well. So we all benefited from this. This is all to say, I'm very excited to launch this thing. I'm very excited to interview some amazing guests. I want to bring on founders, CMOs, heads of sales, growth, GTM. If you know anyone, or if you are that person, reach out. It'd be great to have you on the podcast. If you're open to sharing your secret tricks, I really do want to get into the meat of company growth that no one really talks about, the hard stuff, the difficult stuff. That's really what I want to dive into. So I also want to give a very quick shout out to my boy Justin over at transistor.fm. Justin, you did an amazing job with this. This took me just a few minutes to set up. And what I can now do is record content on YouTube, send it out to my editors, give it the finishing touches and the stamp of approval, and then they can go right in here. I can share access. They'll upload the episodes and the YouTube link, and it'll get auto-distributed to Apple, Spotify, Amazon, all of the places that people go to for podcasts in one fell swoop. It also spins up a website. So I have a little minimum viable site right now at grow.fm. So I have this minimum viable site now at grow.fm. And as I roll out episodes, which will be very soon, you'll see more and more of them appear here. So for everyone who is involved in the show in any capacity, the hosts, Sean, Phil, Henry, the guests, too many to name all at once here, I'm excited to be in your orbit. I'm excited to pick up where things left off with this podcast and continue to grow it, continue to transform it, continue to unlock sales lessons, marketing lessons, go-to-market growth lessons, and help startup founders, startup leaders grow their businesses. It's the hardest and most rewarding thing to do in my book. So excited to have you on my growth journey. I mean that in every context possible. So professionally, personally, podcast business, and your business, your whatever you're up to. So stay tuned, connect, reach out if you haven't already, and keep growing, keep scaling.